So welcome back to our series of 7 habits. We're going to be touching habit 6 today, which is to synergize. And we have some questions lined up for you to review, and this is sort of our summer edition. So welcome back.
Good to be with you, Jim.
Good to see you, Paul. So I'd like to start out with, in this particular habit, we're taught to accept differences in perspective and actually to celebrate them. So I would like you to reflect back in your professional life of an example where you actually saw where valuing differences resulted in a greater outcome than if we didn't do that at all. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, Jim, I was, I'd say, one of the luckiest folks I know. I had the good fortune of meeting and working with two of the early pioneers in the world of computers, Dr. Carl Hammer and Admiral Grace Hopper. They were quite a pair. They're very different. Dr. Hammer had a really wide-angle view. He was kind of a big ideas person, just a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And he would see things in very long-term timelines. Mm-hmm. Admiral Hopper, also just a genius and creative, and I just would sit and listen to her as much as I possibly could. But she was really more of a step-by-step, kind of a serial. I mean, things had to, she did this one before she did the next one. So she and Dr. Hammer were very different. But I will tell you that the explosion of computers immediately following the invention of the Mach 4, the original computer, most of the explosion is credited to Dr. Hammer and Admiral Hopper. So, what I was watching them and trying to learn from them. And here's what I learned, and here's how they were different and how it played together. Admiral Hopper said that Dr. Hammer is the one that saw all of the government and non-government, the commercial uses for hardware. And she said without that, she never would have been able to do what she did. But again, they would be in a room together, and Dr. Hammer, before she would finish, as she's trying to credit him, he would say to her, she was the one who imagined what became software. So she created COBOL and had a hand in the assembler language. So he would credit her for that. I mean, because none of what he was seeing as potential uses could have occurred without that human machine interface known as coding today, software programming. So were they different? Oh my, very different. They would chide each other, and it was just fun to see these two geniuses work. But clearly, they're an example of synergy. This is where 1 + 1 resulted in outcomes way greater than 2. Maybe today's use of computers, we would say millions or billions. 1 + 1 = billions. That's synergy.
That's great. That's a great story, and I love stories about Grace Hopper. I was privileged to met her on active duty in the Navy before she retired, and she was a great example.
Great lady.
Great lady, especially to women in the Navy.
Yes.
Thank you. Paul, one of the concepts in Synergize is to create a third alternative, actually to be able to practice creative cooperation. Have you found, when you deal with some resistance to that concept, have you found an effective way to deal, to reverse that, or to create a atmosphere of willingness?
Yeah, Jim, there's often, particularly in something new, a new endeavor, there can be a lack of willingness to try it. But I've often found, to start with, that lack of willingness is usually because there's almost like a false belief. If we haven't worked together before, maybe it's because we can't work together, or we shouldn't work together, or some judgment thing. And usually what I find is that alone is a paradigm. It's a false belief, just born out of the lack of experience. So here's what I've done. Knowing that that's typically it, what I've learned is to try to find, on whatever the project is, the common benefits across party lines. Look for those. So let me give you an example. So we had one of our advisory boards here in the business school at Longwood was sponsoring a golf tournament, annual golf tournament, and they were doing that pretty successfully. I also was aware of and would often be invited to and go to an athletics gala event, which is an auction and fundraiser. They're both fundraisers. They're two separate divisions, and they had not interacted before. Well, I called a meeting and brought the two groups together, the athletic department and the alumni advisory board, and I just posed a question. Couldn't you guys possibly work together?
Sure,
You know,
sure.
it seems to me there could be some synergy here. I immediately sensed a lack of willingness.
Oh.
Again, they had never done it before, and you
Yeah.
could just tell them freezing up, deer in the headlights. But I was ready with some ideas for common benefit. So I said, well, let me ask you something. I mean, this is a question. I think many of the people you're each recruiting for your 2 events are the same people. Is that true? And they went, oh, yes. Common benefit number 1. I said, well, let me think about this. So you each have a budget, and you're spending time and expertise and money and so forth to do mailings and recruiting, right? Well, is it possible, if you're going after a lot of the same people, is it possible you could combine your budgets, actually maybe reach more people for less cost? And they both went, you could see, now this one it was like, well, wow, yes, common benefit number 2. They decided at the end of that meeting to give it a try. And all I can tell you is here's the result. First of all, the media outreach, the creative ideas that flowed from the different assets between the 2 groups, the social media piece. They had their first, it was a full day, golf tournament in the morning, athletics auction, banquet at night. It was the first time that both events were sold out. First time in history.
That's great.
And the feedback from those participants in both events and the 2 groups that sponsored them together, they had more fun. And of course, it was sold out. They raised more money in each event and collectively between the 2 than ever before. So all we had to do is find the common benefit. Common benefits infuse reality into the situation and diffuse the lack of willingness, which by the way was not realistic to begin with.
That's great.
Synergy works. It leads to inspired cooperation for amazing results.
That's a super good story example to focus on common benefits, and I'm sure if I were being asked by 2 parties, I'd appreciate a one common ask and probably donate more money to a unified approach. It's a great story. Thank you. Thank you. Well, one of my favorite instruments or gifts from the course was the talking stick that was handed out to participants.
It's really
And we use it to practice humility and respect in our circle, and we actually did it in the class.
Yes.
So using that particular tool, why is it important that other people in our circle feel understood?
Okay, really, Jim, again, really powerful question. Well, let's start by acknowledging that better decisions that we can make, that we want to lead to better results, really comes from accessing as much relevant information as possible to make the decision. Okay. Synergizing really is ultimately about securing the relevant information, and I can't really hear and receive the relevant information that you're sharing while I'm talking. All right. The old adage is, listening is more important than talking, and we know that because we got 2 ears and 1 mouth. All right. So this is just a reminder that when I want to join with you to make a decision, to hear the information from you for our mutual benefit, I just need to show up and listen. All right. Well, let's start with that. All right. Now, the talking stick, in my honest opinion, it's just a physical reminder for me that if you're holding the stick, I need to be listening intently to the information you're sharing, again, to understand it, to bring in the information for us to make a decision. And of course, the same is true. If I'm holding the stick, you want to listen intently. Okay. However, I do think this talking stick is a sign of respect, but that's not the important piece. The important piece is the talking stick is like a lightning rod. It is the instrument that connects us to gain the information between us that will allow us to have relevant information and make the best decision for the best results we can get. That's really the usefulness. The real asset isn't the stick or the respect. The talking stick is a symbol that the real asset is the information that needs to be transferred between us, gathering up the most relevant information as possible to make a good decision. That's the lightning rod, that's the talking stick.
That's a wonderful reminder of the physical value of that stick in your hand, and how it reminds us of that beacon and that lightning rod. Analogy is a great one.
The asset is the information.
The information, not the stick.
The stick shows us that we need to pay attention to the information.
Great. Well, Paul, thank you very much for joining us
My
today,
pleasure.
and I hope that the viewers are using this for a refresher for the habits, and we look forward to meeting you again for Habit 7. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.